Welcome back. In this video, we're going to look at methods because we're going to use methods basically throughout the whole course. Methods are a very important aspect, and we're going to see how we can create our own methods. I mean, we created a method already and we used that method, but let's actually look into it a little more because our method was very simple, and let's see how methods work. So imagine we have a game where we need to calculate the same thing many times, like an angle between two objects. The code to do such things could be around 4 to 5 lines of code. Now, if we want to do this multiple times all over again, then it becomes a lot of code that we're reusing. Also, if we decided to change how the angle is calculated, and then we would need to change it in every single place. So let's say we reuse that code again and again and again, and we copied and pasted that code. But now if we change the structure in which we want to do something, we need to change it at every single spot in our code, and we need to double check where did we use the code and all of that. And this is very tricky because a lot of things can go wrong there. So that's where methods come into play, and they're very handy at this case. A method is a piece of code that we can give a name, and then we can call it by its name, and it will execute whatever code we wrote inside of it. We can also write a method that will calculate the value and return the results back to us. So let's look at the general syntax of methods in C#. First, we write the return type, which is the type of data our method will return. For example, if a method will calculate an average of some values, then the return value could be float, as we have seen. So basically a floating point value that will allow us to return proper averages, because an average of just a whole number usually doesn't make sense. We could think of return types as the type of output this method will have. Then we have the method name, and the method name is really just there to distinguish between our different methods, and we can just call them by their name. And then we have the parameters, and these parameters are the input that our method will need to do its job if it needs it. So this could be the list of numbers that the method would need to calculate the average in our previous example. And finally goes our code, which is the body of our method and what makes it unique. Now let's see some real examples. So here we have this method called getDogName, which will return a string, and it requires no data from us to work. That's why our parameters are empty. So the blue opening and closing bracket at the top right is empty. But what this method will do is it will set the name dog to Civ, and then it will return the dog name. Now let's look at another method. It's called doMath, which will return nothing but needs two numbers. So we see here it will return void, and it will require int x and int y. So it requires two integers, two whole numbers. And this method will then calculate the sum of these two numbers, x and y, and store it in the variable z, and then print that variable z. If this method was to return the results, we would need to change the return type from void to int. So if we wanted to return the number z, for example, we could do something similar to what we did here with return dog. We could do with return z instead. But what we're doing here is just printing the result. We're not just returning them. So you have a bunch of options here. You can write different types of methods however you need them. And you have a lot of flexibility, and at the same time you're making sure that your code is maintainable and a lot smoother to use, because you don't need to copy and paste code, and then if you want to make changes, you would need to make changes everywhere. So that's really the power here. Okay, so let's see how methods work in action in the next video, and we're going to use methods all over again and again. So we're going to build so many different methods throughout the course, so no worries if you struggle a little bit at the beginning. The more methods you're going to create and see how they work, the easier it will become, and at one point it will just click. Okay, so see you in the next video.